So once again, my name is Roger Hernandez. I'm an Accelirate Client Engagement Director, and joining us in a few minutes will be Dan Bannoura from UiPath Strategic Director of Customer Success, and we're going to be covering how to run a successful Bot-a-Thon with UiPath StudioX. I'll start on some of the introductory slides, and Dan will cover some of the scaling, how to scale, and how to grow StudioX and Bot-a-Thons in your organization. So what are attended automations and how are they different from standard robotic process automations? Attended automations, sometimes we call them RDA, robotic desktop automations. They automate front office tasks. They work in tandem with humans and they're normally installed on the user's workstation. Employees can download and use pre-made automations on their computer, and employees can create their own personal automations to run on their computer. Contrasted with RPA, robotic process automations, they're typically unattended automations. Sometimes you have a mix or you have hybrids that are a little bit of both, but the majority tend to be unattended. They automate both front office and back office tasks. They run in a dedicated environment and they normally run independently with little or no human interaction. You can have RPA automations that interact with the users, but the majority of the automations tend to have little or no human interaction. Normally, they're installed on a server, a cloud instance, or a virtual machine, and they're created by trained RPA analysts and developers. So a good rule of thumb is RDA, robotic desktop automation, is like hiring a personal assistant to make your life easier. RPA, it's like hiring additional workers to help your business operate more efficiently. So how does your workforce engage with robots? Automation users, they suggest ideas and use automations that are already built and provided, and they run them on their desktop or computers. Citizen developers, they're tech-savvy employees. They develop their own automations to automate their day-to-day business tasks and make their work more efficient. You have power users. They're also tech-savvy employees that develop automations for themselves and their groups and departments. RPA developer, they create automations distributed throughout the company. This is the typical RPA versus RDA breakdown. On the left-hand side, you have remote desktop attended automations, and then RPA developers are the ones who start developing the unattended automations. And finally, you have your COE, your Center of Excellence, that centrally governs self-service automations and facilitate company-wide rollouts, collaborating with IT, infrastructure, and other departments. So attended automation Bot-a-Thons. Bot-a-Thons are a great way to drum up interest, to get your business users and citizen developers engaged, to generate ideas for very useful automations that improve the day-to-day productivity of your employees, and to grow this and scale the use of citizen development in your organization. Each Bot-a-Thon enables participants to develop automations using StudioX. It is a workshop format that allows the business users and developers to use a hands-on training methodology. And the objective is to build attended automations that can eventually be used daily by employees. Normally, it is a 2-day event. It could also be compressed into 1 day, but we recommend 2 days, in addition to a week of prep ahead of time. And you can scale it up and run as many Bot-a-Thons as you think you need for the size of your organization. We've had customers that run one every week. We have customers that run one a month. And somewhere in the middle, a lot of customers will run one every 2 weeks, enabling 32 business users per month. So some of the major teams that are involved, you have your COE, your Center of Excellence. You have your enablement team from Accelirate that includes a trainer and multiple coaches. And then you have the actual business and citizen development team that typically have an SME, multiple business developers, and an Accelirate coach to advise and provide guidance and suggestions. And finally, a group of judges, since we want to make this fun and competitive, a group of judges that can score the automations and hand out prizes for the top scoring automations. So this schedule is very detailed, so I'm not going to go all the way into it, but in general, you have a week of prep time. Well, before that week, we require all citizen developers to take do the self-training in UiPath Academy. Then we have a week of prep time where we actually do training with our trainers, either virtual or in person. These days, more virtual. We also give them an attended automation assignment that will exercise all the skills we've trained on. And the teams get a chance to submit their ideas and use cases for the Bot-a-Thon automations. And finally, we ensure that we have access to all the applications. Everyone has access to StudioX. There's test data that they can work on. And that all happens before the automation kicks off. Now, on the Bot-a-Thon week itself, it really runs over 2 days. So there's 2 days packed with sessions that include training, refreshers, multiple working sessions, a session to finalize and present the bot to the judges, and a team presentation of the judges to score the automations that each team created. And finally, there's a results and conclusion session and an award ceremony where the judges award prizes for different categories. Some of the categories that we'd like to score on and we think it's interesting and engaging are presentation, creativity, identification of steps, and completeness. And then after the Bot-a-Thon, there's a multiple day session that really makes sure that we get feedback from the users and the citizen developers involved in the Bot-a-Thon. We work with each team to plan out what's left to do to complete their bot and make sure it goes into use. We want to make sure we get those bots into production. And we publish the results in a portal or an email to the company at wide to drive engagement and interest in StudioX and citizen development. So once you've been doing these Bot-a-Thons and you want to do a wide-scale rollout to your users, you need an enablement plan. And how you do this will depend on how large a user base you want to do this rollout for. So in this case, we have an example of a business that wants to do a rollout to 500 citizen developers and business users. So one proposal, what we propose is to have a coaching team and have an on-demand remote support and helpline team. And we break up the training sessions into multiple sprints, 50 users a sprint. Again, you can scale this to be smaller, less sessions, or smaller sessions or larger. It depends on what your needs are in terms of time frame and the number of users you want to roll it out. But in this example, we take 1 week to do prep, schedule out who's going to be attending each presentations, make sure it matches with their business and PTO schedule. And then we run multiple hands-on training workshops and training sessions. And at the end, the users get both UiPath and Accelirate certifications on citizen development. And we also include information materials so that they continue their self-paced learning and attend coaching sessions to make sure that they're getting the most benefit from the training. At the same time, we're providing this helpline as the different sprints finish and the users start developing. Our helpline is there to support them, provide guidance, provide coaching, and also help them when they run into issues or bugs that they need to fix in their automation. At the end of this, you have 500 business users that are fully trained on StudioX, that are very excited and that are constantly coming up with ideas and automations to help their day-to-day productivity. How to scale? So once you've done this, and maybe if you don't decide to take this approach, but even if you have, how do you scale to be organization-wide so you get the most benefit from StudioX and from the citizen developer training that you've done? One, identify high-value transformational opportunities to quickly showcase the value and power of attended automation. This is a way of selling the idea and the concepts to the company and of making sure that there's engagement, there's interest, and there's departments lining up to take on citizen development and try it out for themselves. Two, expand quickly. Put robots and digital assistants in the hands of your employees across enterprise to leverage automation of common tasks and activity. as they develop and as they improve their day-to-day productivity, this increased interest it's a virtuous cycle that allows the different departments to see results and continue expanding the number of citizen developers involved in developing these automations. And finally, empower productivity. So automation, sorry about that. Automation beyond the common. So you empower your employees to create their own automations, solve their own specific challenges, and explore new levels of productivity. Once they've solved the simple problems, they'll feel empowered to tackle more complex problems, potentially cross-person or cross-team, and also they'll feel empowered to deal with more complex scenarios that have multiple transitions or handoffs between bot and human, to create more powerful automations that increase the productivity to a higher level. So I think we have Dan on. Dan, did you want to make any questions, or did you want to make any additional comments? I think we still have some technical difficulties. So why don't we go to the Q&A session?
Okay. Roger, the first question would be, how many bots should the client run a year?
I'm getting a little bit of an echo.
Hello, Dan Bannoura just joined.
Hey Dan, how are you? We went through the slides and we're just switching to the Q&A session, but I wanted to take the opportunity for you to give us a little bit more information on how we scale, how we get the different business departments engaged, and how we go from an initial proof of concept to a large deployment across the business users and organization.
Yeah, sure. So first, I apologize for being late. Had some technical difficulties there getting in. Yeah, so just a quick introduction of myself. I don't know if I was introduced before the call started, but I'm Daniel Bannoura with UiPath, and my focus is on strategic approaches with customers on large scale, growing from your first automation all the way up to dozens, if not hundreds, potentially thousands of automations across the organization. So when we're looking at attended, one of the best ways to do that is starting with digital assistants, which is actually starting with something very strategic. So looking at a use case, which a lot of times can happen at the call center, which is a great place to start, and creating an attended robot automation at the call center where a rep can interact with the robot, and the robot can do the work across the multiple systems that the reps would normally do. This allows the call rep to focus on the customer call and collect more important information or have a more meaningful conversation with the person on the phone, while the robot is doing a lot of the basic work that a person would normally do. So it's at one point of contact with the robot, where the robot can have multiple points of contacts across multiple apps. And yeah, I think where I'm going is the last slide there at the end. Yeah, that one there. So starting with that one use case that gives a really big impact. It's very focused. It's a big impact. It has a very clear benefits understanding and an ROI behind it to showcase the power of attended automation. Then what typically happens from there is we get a very quick expansion by using that approach across a broader reach within the business. And that usually involves creating some generic use cases that people can use on their desktop to assist them throughout their day. So they're not building anything, they're not coming up with the ideas, they're basically just consuming automations that have been pre-built to help them with their daily work. Things like helping them launch a Zoom meeting or a GoToMeeting, so you don't have to deal with all the Outlook pop-ups and the Internet Explorer pop-up windows that come with that. It can take care of all that for you. Just say, hey, your meeting's about to start, click here, and it just opens the meeting for you. And then when you're done, it can close everything for you. So just a way to assist the employees on how to be more productive so they can focus on the more important things. And then what starts to happen there is, as they become more used to working with those kind of robots and seeing what the power of a digital assistant can do to help them every day, they start to come up with their own ideas and start to realize that there's additional things that these attendant robots can help them with. And they start to submit some interesting ideas. And usually what happens from there is they're typically focused on a smaller group of people, or maybe even just that one particular person that came up with the idea. So it doesn't make sense to build it centrally and deploy it out, but it does make sense to teach them how to automate that themselves through some very simple training and through our StudioX developer tools that are very simplified for business users. So there's this progression that can grow, starting out very tactical and with a high value single automation, moving to big scale, and then building that from the bottom up with customized self-service automation going forward.
A quick question for you guys. When it comes to like where you've seen Bot-a-Thons succeed or more importantly fail, or not, let me rephrase that, not be as productive for a client, what are the common themes there? So
engaging, they have to be engaging. They have to use ideas that are actually increase productivity for the citizen developers. They have to use ideas that are the right size so that they can be finished either in the Bot-a-Thon or in the Bot-a-Thon plus a few days of coaching. So essentially, if the users feel like they spent a week prepping and 2 weeks in the Bot-a-Thon, and at the end they don't have a useful bot, or they have a bot that still requires multiple weeks of work, they won't feel like they got something out of it. In contrast, if you have ideas that are very focused, can be quickly finished, can be potentially at the end of Bot-a-Thon be working and running on the user's desktop, they feel much more engaged, much more encouraged, and they spread that idea of citizen development to other people in their departments and organizations.
And where have you seen the sweet spot be in terms of how many people should you have be a part of a Bot-a-Thon? Is it, is it an unlimited amount of people? Is it a structured amount?
I would say 12 to 16 citizen developers. You can potentially do up to 20. That's still okay, but you don't want more than 3 or 4 citizen developers per team. If the team is too large, then what happens is some people will do most of the work and some people won't have a chance or won't have anything to work on. So I would say 3, maybe 4 developers and maybe 4 to 5 teams. Otherwise, it gets too unwieldy, the communication and the management of questions and answers and support between the teams.
And have you seen any issue with these delivering these remotely, or is this better suited for a classroom environment? How have you
in the past 6 months, initially we were doing a mix. In the past 6 months, we've been doing purely remote, and we have not seen a big difference in terms of effectiveness. They're both effective. The only thing you want to do is make sure in that prep week, if you're doing virtually, that everybody gets a chance to get familiar with how whether you're using Teams or using WebEx or using GoToMeeting, what tools you're using. They're comfortable using them, and they're comfortable and know when they have questions who it is they'll be talking to, who their coach is, and what the escalation process is. So if a question can't be answered by the coach, how do you escalate to the central support team that's running the Bot-a-Thon and has the StudioX experts?
Gotcha. And now, from a citizen development, you had mentioned the people to be a part of this. What is, besides going through the UiPath training, what level of experience should clients look for in their own group before where this becomes an effective tool for them?
I think most business users can use it, but the ones that tend to pick it up the quickest are ones that are already doing their own little almost like mini automation. They use Excel macros, they use Word macros. They are comfortable with more complex, spreadsheets or Office flows or Office 365 using some other capabilities. But again, this is a very there isn't nowhere near the level of complexity that you see with traditional programming. So it's much, much easier to pick up. If you have business users that know their process well, they're likely to be able to automate part of it. Even if they're not power users, they'll still be able to automate certain sections of their business process. But the ones that become power users are the ones that are already doing things like building Excel macros, for example.
And then as these Bot-a-Thons complete, is the expectation that these team members are ready and off to the races, or how, do they need support? How are clients supporting these end users once
Absolutely.
This completes?
And it'll depend on the user, but we recommend to have attended automation support service. You can do it in your COE, but we also provide one. We can provide attended automations that include a helpline. It includes online coaching, online access to analysts that can help guide which ideas and how to design your bot, and also debugging and troubleshooting when bots get stuck or don't work as expected. So I would say your power users might not need as much of that, but your regular citizen developers will definitely find it very useful to have that helpline and that support service available.
And then the other thing is, and I'm not sure if you can get into this, but or if one comes to mind, is there a success story of like a successful automation that you saw come out of one of these Bot-a-Thons that had a good impact to the business?
Sure. I mean, two that I've seen is one was an audit department that would do they would do checks of users. What is that called? They would check the levels of authority they had to fund projects. So each user in the organization, this is a very large organization, depending on their position, would have a budget limit that they could authorize for projects. And then that limit would have to be reviewed quarterly to make sure, one, that the user hasn't moved, hasn't changed position, that the budgets haven't changed. That was a very manual process for them. They didn't have automated tools. It involved multiple systems. One system would have the user list, another system would track the actual budget authorization limits for positions. They would have to manually merge two spreadsheets, and it was a very painful process. They wanted to run it more often, but they couldn't because it took too many days. So they created a bot to extract the spreadsheet from one side, extract it from the other, merge it together, and then the user could visually see the bot do that and review the spreadsheet. It allowed them to run it instead of quarterly, monthly, and catch issues much earlier in the process. So that was one significant win.
Okay.
Another, I think, Dan, you mentioned there was one that dealt with Outlook attachments.
Yeah, Dan, if you're able to dive into that, that'd be great.
Yeah, so we're actually building one for a couple of customers right now. This is something that we can eventually share once we have it completed. But there's a couple of things around content and document policies and security requirements for a lot of customers, which is when you're attaching a document to an email and it has confidential internal use only on it, and then the email itself has external recipients on it. Sometimes that can be by mistake. Sometimes that can be on purpose if it's a legal department doing something with a vendor or something. So what the robot will do is it'll catch that, and it will give you a pop-up that's saying, I see that you're sending this document to an external source. Is that your intention? And if you say yes, then you have to provide a reason code back to say why you're sending an internal document to an external source, so that you now have like an audit trail on a document that needed an exception to the policy that would have prevented it from going out. So that was something that was brought to us as an option, an opportunity, and that's something that I think we are hopefully going to be able to share with every customer we have at some point.
That's great. And then we did have a question here, Roger, if I'm correct, the ideal duration for a Bot-a-thon is about it's 1 week of just the Bot-a-thon, correct? But it's
no, it's 1 week of prep, but that doesn't use the user's time is maybe a couple of hours a day at the most, right?
Okay.
I would say 2 or 3 days for training, then maybe half an hour here or there, to review the ideas, to go through the final idea. It's not a full-time week. The actual Bot-a-thon that requires their full attendance is 2 days. So
Okay.
2 working days, and then partial, a little bit of their time, less than 2 hours a day the week before, and maybe 1 or 2 follow-up sessions where you work with the team to make sure that their bot, they know what needs to happen to make him go into production. But again, that's less than an hour. So really 2 full days.
Gotcha. And then Dan, maybe you can help with this last question. I know we're running up against 12:30 here. With the concept of the citizen developer, the Bot-a-thons, a lot of concern around shadow IT starts to get in there. Can you talk more about governance and security concerns with citizen developers?
Yeah, absolutely. So the tool itself provides a lot of that governance. So you've got those guardrails built already into the tool, which can limit what applications they can automate against, what libraries they can download, and what feeds they can get from Orchestrator or from Automation Hub. So you can kind of control what they can do with the tool to some extent. But even without those controls, they cannot do anything that they wouldn't normally have permission to do in the first place. So as they're logged in as themselves into their Windows workstation, that robot runs under that credential. So if a person has a limitation on access, the robot will have that same limitation as well. So when you take a look at what's happening there, you start to realize that there's very little that a business user can do, either intently or by accident, to cause issues in the environment. The other thing that's also a nice advantage here is that they don't have to publish their automations to the orchestrator. They can keep things local, which is actually kind of the recommended approach. Is let them build it, they run it locally, it does the work on their desktop as them. But even if they do that, all the audit trail, audit logs are actually still captured by the orchestrator. So you can still go in and get the audit trail of what happened with an automation on a person's desktop, even if they don't publish that to the orchestrator. So you get the audit trail, you get the governance, you have some of the controls and guardrails in place, plus just the natural security of the system that they work on to make sure you don't have the Wild West or the shadow IT function that you're talking about.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Well, Dan, Roger, thank you so much for your time. This is an exciting area. We've seen a lot of success in getting companies and clients excited and their employees excited. Unattended automation or back office RPA, it has been something that's been benefiting the business, but I think we've seen a lot of excitement from users finally getting to see this help them on their day-to-day basis. So I know we're a couple of minutes over here, so we'll wrap up. Roger, Dan, thanks so much, and everyone have a great day.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.